Welcome to the Trump presidency. And we have a special presentation about halfway through on the change in Orange County and in LA County, different system, probably similar but different, into voting centers in which you vote either by mail or you go to these kind of regional voting centers to cast your ballot with a longer period of time to actually cast them. And you'll find out all the details later on today. But first, there's been a few things happening regarding the Trump presidency. You may have heard about some of them. And let me give you some of the highlights. I call this episode 39 of the Trump presidency, The Trials of Donald Trump, John Trump. Day 1,105 of the presidency. We'll talk a little bit about what's the news affecting the presidency. We'll talk a little bit about the trial, and we'll end up on the taking a look at the Iowa caucuses that will occur next Monday evening in, obviously, Iowa. Then we'll do the special presentation. Okay. I do want to note to you we'll have a full program next Tuesday, the first of our See How They Run the Elections of 2020, in which we'll go through the presidential, we'll go through state elections and local elections. So we have a full political presentation coming if you are into those things. In this room, 10 a.m., normal time, and somehow I'll try to find fix number 5 to this issue of my AV resources. Anyway, we'll get into that a little bit later on, okay, the voting centers. Let's talk about the big news. Well, the president unveiled the 3 years in the making Mideast peace plan to a lot of prominence. He had both the prime minister and the prime minister candidate, if you would, the head of the party, come over to have briefings on it. Netanyahu, who the same day was his indictment for corruptions was entered back in Jerusalem or wherever they do the indictments in Israel. They seem both happy to be talking about something else. The president's plan is an ambitious plan. And some say that it might be a solution plan if it hadn't been negotiated to this point. But since there was no negotiations with the Palestinians, at their insistence, because they felt the administration was leaning too far to the Israeli position to begin with, so it's kind of one party's desire. I think the president in his announcement said, he enumerated all the things that his administration, or the major things his administration has done, he feels on behalf of Israel, and then said, but we have to do something for the Palestinians, and then presented the plan. And the plan involves creating a two-state solution, a modified sovereignty to the Palestinians, not in charge of their security services, suppression of the anti-Israeli groups in the Palestine area, and rearrangement of some of the areas that would be in both countries, both nations. Complicated. Worth taking a deep dive into it, except that it appears, at least initially, dead on arrival to the Palestinians. And even other Arab countries kind of stood back and said, good that you tried, but we are not signing on to it, at least at this point. It involves also a high-speed train between parts of the, I think from Gaza to the other parts of the Palestinian. They get a bullet train. They get a bullet train under this. Internationally funded, not clear who's going to pay for that bullet train. It wasn't like the United States is going to pay for it. It's going to be internationally funded. And of course, the timing was good politics for both Netanyahu and President Trump. Now, good timing is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just good. It certainly kind of took the focus away from other things happening in both capitals. The President also yesterday signed the U.S. Mexican-Canadian agreement, the NAFTA secession agreement. Mexico has already ratified it and has passed and have pledged to enact a number of other implementing measures. Canada still hasn't ratified, but it's expected maybe even this week. The president's people made sure that no Democrats who were invited, even those Democrats that negotiated with the U.S. Trade Representative to get the Democrats to sign on and vote for the agreement. Bernie Sanders was not one of those Democrats that signed on to the agreement. He said he couldn't support it because it did not improve the environment. He said with a trade agreement that doesn't address climate change and commit countries to do a better job is not an agreement that he basically was okay with the rest of the agreement, but not what he felt was the lacking part in terms of the environment. The Supreme Court weighed in. Justice Roberts went from the impeachment trial over back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court announced that they would allow the Trump administration to proceed with a wealth test for immigrants, so that you would have to prove to a greater degree than you have to prove now that you won't become a public charge. Now, that's always been part of as long as we've had the immigration laws, and that's only in the last 100 years, we've had immigration laws. Before, come on in. That there's been some, provisions limiting people without a lot of wealth. Oftentimes it required a domestic sponsor. Many of the Eastern Europeans were sponsored in New York by particularly by Jewish organizations to come into the country. And other sponsors have been in the past to assume that the person will not become a public charge. And the president was the first president to go to the annual March for Life. That was symbolic, an important milestone in the anti-abortion movement in America. The president pointed out all that he's done in that area since he changed his mind on the subject. Because at one point, as you may recall, he said he was very pro-choice until he realized, in his words, that babies were being killed. And the president went beyond that, of course, and announced that his administration would target the state of California and other states that requires abortion coverage in health plans issued in the state using any federal money. The Congressional Budget Office provided mixed news. The good news to the president and Americans in general is that they forecast a higher rate of growth than they previously forecast. Even though last year was the lowest growth rate in, I think, 4 or 5 years. So they better growth ahead. But the deficit will also grow. And hasn't been effectively offset by the tax cuts, whether it's individuals or corporate tax cuts. So it's mixed news if you're concerned about deficits and borrowing. And Americans say, in a recent Fox poll released just a couple of days ago, that they have a very good feeling about the condition of the economy. I mean, other than partisan leaning, historically, the state of the economy is one of the biggest predictors of what happens in a presidential race if there's an incumbent party, candidate from that party, their ability to get reelected. So that's kind of good news. And there was this, the trial of the president. As you recall, there's 2 articles of impeachments before the Senate: abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. If you, last 2 days, yesterday and today, if you were a senator and you wanted to submit a question to either legal counsel or both, you raise your hand, you send your little card in with your question. It's picked up by the clerk of the Senate. It's brought over to the Chief Justice, who then reads it. And then the recipient side of this argument has up to 5 minutes to answer. And many may say now that this is now the closing argument. They had the opening argument, and this now has become the closing argument. Some would say there should be something in between, but we'll see. Now, Alan Dershowitz this morning tweeted that he's been grossly, his comments yesterday were grossly mischaracterized by in effect, the liberal media. When he said that a president, if motivated by the country's best interests and his belief that his reelection is in the country's best interest, cannot be found guilty of the charges that the House managers have brought. To which there has been a big pushback by many in the legal community that what you're saying is, wouldn't any politician say their reelection or their election is in the public interest? He said there's 3 types of interests. One's clearly corrupt. And that is, you ask a country, I would do, or anyone, I would do this, and you give me $1 million, or $100, or $1 billion. And then there's the one that you do a quid pro quo in the national interest, which is the nature of transactional diplomacy and domestic negotiations with interest groups. And that's clearly, what is intended by a chief magistrate, intended by the political process, is to reconcile interests. And then there's the third one, your perception of what's in the national interest. And if your perception of the national interest is your reelection, unless the quo in the quid pro quo is by itself illegal, your intent doesn't matter. Your intent is lawful. That's what he argued. He said I said other things too. He gave an example. When Obama didn't follow up on bombing or taking action against Syria when he drew the red line, if he would, that was a quid pro quo. If he did it to lessen the political impact on him, decided not to do that. That is similar. Well, interesting argument. The president's attorneys obviously have gone after the House manager's arguments and report. That's not surprising. Ken Starr being there is somewhat surprising. He talked about the trauma that an impeachment trial brings to the country. Some called the president's defense the deny everything defense. Others say that the president's defense has evolved from the perfect conversation to there was no quid pro quo, to no one has proved, no one has had personal knowledge or interaction with him has come forward, to doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Now, during the trial, the government accounting office, the independent or the bipartisan government accounting office appointed by the leader of which is appointed by the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader, came out with a report saying they thought the President broke the law in freezing the Ukrainian aid. That hasn't gotten a whole lot of publicity. Now, those of you who remember last week, the Democrats emphasized abuse of power charges and preemptively defended the Bidens because they thought the Republican would argue that. Adam Schiff branded Trump a danger and gave his reason. Trump was complimented by Lindsey Graham for his advocacy, though Graham is strongly for the president, and certainly his position hasn't moved as a consequence. Let me pass that for a second. One of the arguments that some legal scholars have made and political analysts have made, the more the president can focus on the Ukraine, probably the better off he is, because few Americans care about foreign policy. Or as Secretary Pompeo famously over the weekend challenged NPR reporter to point out where Ukraine is on a map without countries, noted which countries imprinted on it. But to the extent the argument centered on the president's quid pro quo, that is, having a political opponent investigated and using his influence to do that, a political opponent, an American citizen, the more it was focused on that, Democrats would have an advantage. So the big fight, as you know, is now over whether or not witnesses will be called and which witnesses. And it very much appears that the Senate Majority Leader is very close to having the votes to prevent that. Now, some political analysts take the view that might actually be a win-win for Democrats. And how could that be? Why would Mitch McConnell do a favor to Democrats? Well, here's how this argument goes. If they called witnesses, probably it would require some log rolling so that the president's attorneys could call some witnesses. And to the extent they make their defense, the Bidens or other charges against Democrats, the more murky this trial becomes. Better to be refused being able to call a material witness, a witness that in a book manuscript that his lawyer has verified is substantially or is correct about the comments he makes in that book, that he had personal knowledge, personal contact with the president on the key facts in this matter, that by refusing to hear a material witness after arguing that the president arguing that only hearsay evidence was there about his involvement. So we'll see, and even though the vote probably is tomorrow, could come even perhaps tonight on that. No one thought that John Bolton would do Democrats a favor. No one would ever think, and I don't think he is. I think he's either doing it in the national interest or in its own personal interest. Does it really matter? In a criminal trial, do you matter if someone is doing it just to protect themselves or their reputations? If you can find the facts, if they prove to be credible. president's attorney said they were trying to block Bolton's book on national security concerns. One senator offered any senator that wants to understand what Bolton has in mind can read the manuscripts, but only in the very secure intelligence listening rooms and reading rooms in the Capitol. But this is going to be a book, but in the Capitol, because this is such highly classified material. Interesting argument. Now, earlier today, the president did a tweet declaring that an old video on Bolton defending the president on Ukraine and one of Adam Schiff talking about the lack of credibility that John Bolton has solves the issue. Game over, said the president. Because Adam Schiff says he's unreliable, the country should believe him. But the former chief of staff to the president, his longest serving chief of staff, indicated if Bolton says it, it's probably true. You know, it's tough. It would be tough going to a reunion event of the White House people. You know, those years.
Visitors pass to the jails.
Yeah, it's Scaramucci talking. You have people. You know, I'm just interesting. Some Republican senators were visibly upset when Adam Schiff said that that the reason why they're not doing their constitutional duty because of the base would put their head on a stick. Head on a pike, to be exact. Wall Street Journal says that this is kind of purely a battle between congressional powers and executive powers, and do we really want Congress to be king? And of course, I think Democrats would say, do you really want anyone to be king? Joe Biden yesterday on the trail said any trial claims would be a hit job on him. And the president's been busy trying to change the subject, been active. The coronavirus also helps. The president didn't do that. No conspiracy there. Though the Secretary of Commerce today said, you know, that could have a good impact on Americans because think of all the jobs that are coming back to America as Google and Apple pull out their employees. Of course, they'll be at March Air Force Base or Norton Air Force Base for a while. Where is it, March or Norton? March? Okay. The other day, Trump went to a New Jersey rally and hit congressional Democrats and went to the member of the House who voted against Democrat, who voted against impeachment and then changed parties and now is a Trump acolyte. Now, I think it's probably more likely that Democrats are going to vote with Republicans on the trial than Republicans are going to vote for Democrats. And why would that be? Well, we had one, Dianne Feinstein, who was never a strong, you should go ahead and try an impeachment, said the other day she's not sure she'll vote to convict the president. But she does believe he should be removed in the election. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, heavy Trump state. It's always amazing why any Democrats can be elected there now. The recently elected Democratic U.S. Senator from Arizona has indicated her problems. Doug Jones, who's probably just barely beat an alleged pedophile in that special election. So you could easily have 3 to 5 Democratic votes against impeachment coming up. Yeah, remember I showed you the one Fox poll that talked about how well the economy is doing, according to Americans. This same poll also had this. And that should the Senate vote to convict and remove the president? 50% yes, 44% no. That may be the nature of the divisions in America at this point. Media agenda, the vote either today or tomorrow on calling witnesses. I wouldn't bet that witnesses would be called. Seems like they're down to 2 or 3 votes to call witnesses, whether or not that whole witness vote collapses if they can't get to 4, the magic number. Then the president, just like Bill Clinton came, except Bill Clinton came during his trial. This, President Trump may come right after his trial. State of the Union. That should be fun. That should be high drama. I wonder why it would be high drama. Okay, quickly, and then we'll go to our special presentation today. We have the election season really starting next Monday, starting in the Iowa caucuses. Very few people actually vote in the Iowa caucuses. I think less than 300,000 will vote in the Democratic caucus, according to the latest estimates from the party leaders there. We're only 4 days away. We're very close to many milestones. 4 days from Iowa, 12 days from New Hampshire, 23 days to Nevada, 30 days to South Carolina, 33 days to Super Tuesday, that includes California, and 278 to the November election. And 356 days until we'll have the next president of the United States, whoever that may be the current guy. Okay, quickly, who's ahead, who's behind? It looks like Biden and Sanders are really close now, both in Iowa and New Hampshire, in the opening states, but also nationwide. Remember last time I showed this slide, someone said, who's no one? And I misinterpreted this slide. It means that no one would get a majority of the delegates. No one would get a majority of the delegates going into the convention. That's based upon the 538 forecasting model, which changes with every credible input. So it's not like, this is the forecast today at that time, not necessarily what will be on election day. Sanders is certainly moving up. He's getting a lot more media coverage too. Quickly in the Iowa caucuses, and then we'll go into our special presentation. It starts at 6. The doors open in the caucuses at 6:30. You have to go to a location for the most part. You gather to hear speakers, your neighbors speak for various candidates. Then you go to one part of the room and be with. You declare yourself, publicly declare yourself by being in one part of the room. If you don't get at least 15%, you can either go home or you can go to caucus with another group, and that's how the system works. And the Democratic Party, and this is delegates informally pledged to these candidates. The actual delegates being elected are to the state convention. To the state convention, the Democratic Party will talk about, the candidate preferences of those delegates. They'll put that number out. They'll put out the number how many each candidate got in the first vote, and how many equivalent delegates they got in a third thing. So I put out 3 results. It's a complicated part. You really have to be committed to politics to show up, and that's why the turnout usually is less than 10%. 10%. And for voters unable to attend their precinct caucuses, they can conduct the process remotely through satellite caucuses, 60 of which are in Iowa. Okay, let's end here by just, by the way, the president is putting a lot of members of his administration into Iowa over the weekend and into next week to kind of show his strength there. A number of cabinet secretaries, members of Congress, Republican leaders will be in Iowa promoting the president. We'll be back in this class in 2 weeks. Next Tuesday, we'll talk about the results of the Iowa caucus, and we'll start looking forward. Okay, let's go to the presentation by the League of Women Voters.
Okay, I'm Jan Wagner. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and the Registrar of Voters has asked us to partner with them to explain changes in the way we vote this election and moving forward. So today we'll be talking about the Voters' Choice Act, including its history and upcoming changes. Let's talk about how vote centers came to Orange County. Senate Bill 450, also known as the Voters' Choice Act, was passed by the Senate and the state in 2016. This law allows certain counties, including Orange County and Los Angeles County, to make voting easier and more convenient. In this model, all registered voters will get a vote by mail ballot in the mail, and any voter will be able to vote at a vote center anywhere in the county or drop off their vote by mail ballot at any ballot drop box. After the state passed the Voters' Choice Act, the Orange County Board of Supervisors all voted in February 2019 to change Orange County elections to run vote centers instead of polling places. Over the last 20 years, we've seen three major trends for voters in the county. First, more voters are choosing to vote by mail. With more people choosing to vote by mail, we see less people going to vote in person. And finally, although less people are voting in person, more people are choosing to drop off their vote by mail ballots at polling places. As you can see, not many people voted by mail in 1996 because only certain voters were allowed vote by mail ballots in California. Currently, any voter in California is allowed to request a vote by mail ballot. You can see that jump started in 2002. In 2018, the registrar sent out a record high of 1.1 million vote by mail ballots to voters who requested them. This is a 6,507% increase from 1996. Based on the past 20-year growth, we predict a 91% of voters will choose to vote by mail in the year 2022. As voters are already choosing to vote by mail, the change to vote centers makes sense, since every registered voter will receive a vote by mail ballot. In 2004, there were about 51,000 voters that dropped off their vote by mail ballot in person. By 2018, that had tripled to over 170,000. Voters are choosing to drop off their vote by mail ballots in growing numbers, so having vote centers and ballot drop locations gives them more options that are convenient and secure. The Voters' Choice Act changes three big things about voting. First, every registered voter will get a vote by mail ballot and have a choice to return it by mail at a ballot drop box or at a vote center. Second, voters can now vote at any vote center in the county. A voter can choose if it's easier for them to vote at lunch, near work, after they drop off their children near daycare, or while running errands. Voters are no longer tied to a precinct near their home. Third, voters no longer are tied to one day of voting. Ballot drop boxes will be open for 30 days, including Election Day. Some vote centers will be open for 11 days, including Election Day, so voters can vote on a Saturday or a Sunday. All vote centers will be open the weekend before Election Day with extended hours. Before, voters had to request a vote by mail ballot. Starting in March, all registered voters will receive a vote by mail ballot. Before, voters had fewer choices. They could vote in person or return their voted ballot. Starting in March, voters will have a choice of mailing, dropping off, or voting in person at any vote center in Orange County. Before, the Registrar of Voters recruited volunteers to help at polling places on Election Day. Starting in March, the registrar will have hired staff people at every vote center, and they will have received extended training. For 11 days, including Election Day, there will be 38 locations open throughout the county. For 4 days, including Election Day, there will be 188 locations open throughout the county with longer hours. All vote centers will be open Saturdays and Sundays. So what can you do at a vote center? If you need a replacement ballot, say you lost your vote by mail ballot, you can walk into a vote center and get a new ballot on the spot. You can also drop off your ballot inside a vote center, or you could drop it off at a ballot drop box. There will be an electronic check-in system, which really speeds up the process. Before, there was one paper roster at a polling place. At vote centers, there will be upwards of 4 to 5 electronic check-in stations. The ballot-on-demand voting system allows vote center staff to be able to provide every voter with the ballot they are supposed to get. It also supports accessible voting options. Vote centers are able to provide expanded services, including registration, updating addresses, changing your party, voting in person or dropping off a vote-by-mail ballot, getting a replacement ballot, getting language assistance, using accessible marking devices for those voters who have accessibility needs in order to vote independently. At vote centers, hired staff maintains strict control of the voting equipment and ballots. Assigned vote center employees are identified to be responsible for the tracking and return of voting equipment and ballots. Voters can follow their ballots online like they track a package from Amazon. Real-time voter updates allow tracking from the moment vote-by-mail ballots leave the registrar of voters' office, when it arrives in your mailbox, when you mail it back, and when it arrives back at the registrar. In the past, a voter that went to a polling place could only vote in person or drop off a vote-by-mail ballot. Vote centers are truly a one-stop shop. The voters will have a better experience taking care of everything they need in one place. So what are ballot drop boxes? Voters will have even more options to return their vote-by-mail ballots at a ballot drop box located throughout the county. They have been created to provide a way for voters to return their vote-by-mail ballot directly to the Registrar of Voters' office. This option supports the trend of voters who prefer to return their vote-by-mail ballot directly. Ballot drop boxes are secure, accessible, and conveniently located. There will be about 110 ballot drop boxes located throughout the county, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 30 days, including Election Day. It is not your average mailbox. A ballot drop box is easy to spot, and every effort has been made to place them in locations with existing camera coverage for added security. They will be permanently installed, so they'll be there from election to election, so you know where you can go to drop off your ballots. Ballot drop boxes are made with military-grade metal. If a car hits a ballot drop box, it's the car that is going to be damaged. To prevent vandalism, all drop boxes will have an anti-graffiti coating, as well as scheduled maintenance and cleaning. Information will be posted in multiple languages, and all ballot drop boxes are open to all voters. A toll-free number will be displayed for voters to call in any questions or report any concerns. This is a vote center calendar. With both ballot drop boxes and vote centers, there will be multiple opportunities to vote in different ways, on different days, and at different times. As you can see here, ballot drop boxes are open for 30 days, including Election Day. Then the first 38 vote centers open for 11 days, including Election Day for regular business hours. The number of vote centers then grows to 188 and will be open for 4 days, including Election Day, for extended hours. On Election Day, all ballot drop boxes and all vote centers will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The Registrar of Voters has taken a lot of things into consideration for selecting where to put vote centers and ballot drop boxes. Locations will be decided based on requirements by law, location availability, and public feedback. Some of the requirements included public transportation, population centers, language communities, low-income communities, low rates of household vehicle ownership, traffic patterns, and vote-by-mail usage. The Registrar of Voters used voter and population data to help choose the best locations for vote centers throughout the county. Vote center and ballot drop box locations can be viewed on their website using the Vote Center Lookup tool. The Vote Center Lookup tool is an interactive map that helps locate nearby vote centers or ballot drop boxes using your address or your location on your smartphone. You'll also find a complete list of them inside the ballot that was sent to your home. You can take care of many of your voting-related questions by visiting ocvote.com/verify. Some examples include being able to check your voter registration record, see the status of your ballot, download your voter information guide, find out who your local elected officials are, and request a party ballot if you are a no partisan preference voter. Voters not registered with a qualified political party, also known as no party preference voters, may vote a ballot of a qualified political party, allowing participation by non-affiliated voters. For the 2020 presidential primary election this March, the parties allowing no party preference voters to vote their party's ballot for the President of the United States are the Democratic Party, the American Independent Party, and the Libertarian Party. If you are a no-party preference voter and wish to vote for a presidential candidate in the Republican Party, the Green Party, or the Peace and Freedom Party, you must re-register in that party. People don't realize that the primaries are controlled by 3 different entities. They are controlled by the Constitution of the state or the federal government that controls who is qualified to run for office. They are controlled by the state who is charged with running the election. And then they are controlled by the political parties who set the rules as to who they will accept to decide who is their candidate under their party. And they have a choice as to whether or not to allow which voters to vote in their primary or whether or not to have a primary election at all. A no-party preference voter has several options when it comes to requesting a party ballot. Up until February 25th, which is the last day to request a vote-by-mail ballot, a no-party preference voter can make their request by mailing back the no-party preference postcard. Online at ocvote.com/no-party-preference, NPP, via email and regular mail, and by calling the Registrar of Voters office or faxing in their request. After February 25th, a no-party preference voter must come to a vote center to request a party ballot. For more information or to review frequently asked questions, you can go to ocvote.com. We have same-day voter registration in California, so you can go and register or change your party or request a ballot on the same day of the election if you wish. If you do that, though, you will be voting a provisional ballot. Here are some important dates going into the March 3rd, 2020 presidential primary election. And we'll go into questions later if you wish. You can see that Thursday, January 23rd, most of you have already received your guide, and that vote-by-mail balloting will begin on the 3rd of February. For the March 3rd, 2020 presidential primary election, the Registrar of Voters will be deploying mobile pop-up voting units at various locations throughout Orange County during a 10-day early voting period. Voters will be able to receive the same services at the mobile pop-up voting unit as at a regular vote center. And there are locations all over the county. None are terribly close to us. There's one at Rockwell Cafe in Villa Park, at the Seal Beach Farmers Market, at the Civic Center Plaza in Santa Ana, at the Buena Park Farmers Market, Anaheim City Hall, the former San Clemente City Hall, the Laguna Niguel Farmers Market, and the County Community Service Center in Westminster. If you wish, you can go to the Registrar of Voters website or sign up for their social media. They have a wealth of information on their website. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, and if you wish and we have time, I can also, as is normal for the League of Women Voters, answer questions about the propositions on the ballot. The question was, does the increased amount of time for voting, how does that affect the tallying of the voting? And the answer is that it makes it faster. All of this will make it faster. The main reason is because with so many people walking in their vote-by-mail ballot in the past, what often happened actually was that a lot of people would walk in to vote without their vote-by-mail ballot. They would have requested a vote-by-mail ballot and they'd have forgotten to bring it along with them, and so they would just come in and vote. Well, when you do that, you get a provisional ballot, and we were giving out a huge number of provisional ballots, and all of those have to be counted by hand. And so it takes a great length of time to do that. This way, we are greatly reducing those provisional ballots, and it's much, much faster. One other question that often comes up, what happens if I take my vote-by-mail ballot and I drop it in a drop box, and then I present myself 10 minutes later at a vote center and I ask for a ballot? And they give me one. Well, what happens is they have a record of the ballot that they mailed to you, and as soon as you request a ballot, they can tell whether or not they have received your vote-by-mail ballot. And if they have not, as soon as they give you a new ballot, they invalidate the one they mailed to you. So it instantly is null. So if it then comes in, it comes later, it's null. It goes away. And if they think that you had criminal intent, they'll come knock on your door. The question was, on election day, are the votes counted by the same process that they were before? And to my knowledge, it is yes. The question is, she's gone on the website to look for nearby vote center locations, and she has seen one that is nearby in a residence hall, and is that correct? And the answer is yes, that could very well be correct. Be sure when you look those up that you look at when they're open, because remember, all vote centers are not open for the same length of time. But yes, that could be, and it probably was because it's near students. Yes, right here. The question was, can I speak anything about maintaining the cybersecurity of this process? I can say two things. The first thing I can say is that the Registrar of Voters system, both the vote center system and their own system, is a closed system, i.e. it is not linked to anything else, okay? It is completely separate to itself. So it doesn't go on the web or on the cloud or any of that. It is a closed system. Everything else I can say to you is that the registrar has said that security is very important, and I can direct all security questions to their security experts. Call them. They don't want us giving out security information. Proposition 13 is on the ballot. It is not in any way going to change the way your property tax base is evaluated. It has nothing to do with that. Someone in their infinite wisdom decided it was time to use that number again. It is a $15 billion facilities bond that would repair, reconstruct, or modernize school facilities from pre-K through public university and community college. It is a similar bond issue to one you have seen many times before. It does have some changes to those that you have seen before. This one, we have basically two kinds of school bonds that you have seen. One, you will note on local school bonds, sometimes they will talk about receiving matching funds from the state. This bond is refilling that pot of matching funds that those local bonds can pull from, okay? So it's a state bond. Like all state bonds, it's guaranteed by the state general fund. This would allot $9 billion for pre-K through 12 and $6 billion for public university and community college. Within the $9 billion, it does have $500 million that is allocated for charter schools, that's new, and $500 million for career technical. The estimated cost for the total bond of $15 billion would be $26 billion with interest over a 35-year repayment, probable repayment period. The key changes in this bond from bonds you have seen before there are three. The state share of the project cost changed. Historically, the state cost of a project would be 50% for new construction and 60% for modernization. This one replaces that with a sliding scale. Districts could ask the state for 50 to 55% for new construction and 60 to 65% for modernization. And it's a sliding scale based on districts that have a preponderance of low-income students, English learners, and foster youth. The second big difference is it replaces those who are applying for that matching money from a first-come, first-served basis to a priority system where projects that are for health and safety uses have first priority. Districts that have difficulty passing or achieving their local match or are low poverty areas or have lead in their water, those all get a higher priority. And then as an additional boost, those who use unionized labor on their projects also get a priority boost. And the reason for changing it to a priority basis is because there used to be, or there has become a concern that your well-funded suburban school districts or your large urban districts like LA, frankly like Fullerton, Yorba Linda, Brea, all of our well-funded suburban school districts, we have big enough staffs to be able to write bond proposals and to be able to do the technical work necessary to be able to access this money quickly. And the districts that have less money have less staff, and that they often weren't able to access the money before it ran out. So that's what this is addressing. Thirdly, it is requiring all applicants to submit a 5-year facility plan. There are also changes to the local match rules. Okay, so there's two parts for this money. There's the money that you're going to apply for, and then you have to have a local match. So it raises the local limits on what a district can raise money. So if for an elementary and high school district, which is what Fullerton has, we have Fullerton Elementary District and Fullerton High School District, it used to be that they could only assess 1.25% to 2%, I'm sorry, they could only assess up to 1.25% of your assessed property value. They can now raise that to up to 2% of the assessed property value. If you've got a unified school district, such as in Placentia Yorba Linda, it would go, or in a college district, it would go from a 2.5% assessed valuation. They could now assess up to a 4% assessed valuation. Okay, if a district is unable to pass a bond for their local match, Used to be that they only had to raise up to $5 million. They've raised that to up to $15 million. And if they can't raise it, they can go to the state and say, we can't raise it, we need you to give us all the money. And the third is it limits developer fees. Now, this only applies, these rules only apply when these are for school bonds, okay? So it prohibits fees on multifamily dwellings within a half a mile from major transit stops. And all multifamily residential construction fees are reduced to 20%. Or by 20%, I'm sorry, not to 20%, by 20%. You can see where the direction is going on that as well as others. In terms of total bonded indebtedness for the state of California, our total bonded indebtedness on our general fund peaked in 2010 at about 6%. It is now down to about 4%. And this particular bond, if approved, would change it to a peak of about 4.1%. Realize that when we have bonds, if you approve a $15 billion bond, we don't sell $15 billion in bonds tomorrow, okay? It's sold over time as the projects are approved and the money is needed. And that's why you've got an estimated 35-year sale and repayment period. It's going to be phased out for a long time. Okay, so who's for it? The people that are for it are the people who want to use it, and other good government groups or what? Good government groups isn't the word I want to use. They're social services groups. So you've got the Nurses Association, the Firefighters Association, the Education Association, those sorts of folks are for it. Who's against it? Who's always against changes in taxes? The Howard Jarvis Association. That's who's against it. So, and that's every bond. Pick up any bond, that's who you're going to see, okay? And there is really no change in that kind of situation. So, and the arguments are always the same. The arguments are that those in favor say, it's just like your mortgage. You're not expected to pay for everything up front all at once. You pay for things over time. To do that, you have to borrow. And that people in the future are going to be using these facilities. It's reasonable to ask them to help pay for them. And those against it say, we're borrowing too much already. We just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and at some point we've got to stop. So that's it. There's one other county-wide issue on the ballot. It's called Charter Amendment A. It has no opposition. The one thing, so what it does is it requires a 2/3 vote of the Board of Supervisors to propose taxes to be passed by the voters. We already have a rule in our charter that requires the Board of Supervisors to ask voters to approve all taxes, all tax increases in the county. This changes that requirement to require a 2/3 vote. There is no opposition. It was put on the ballot by a couple of the Board of Supervisors who happen to be running for re-election. The only thing that I would point out to you is math. 2/3 vote is something that is very common when you're talking about large bodies. The Congress, the legislature, 2/3 vote is no big deal. Well, it is a big deal, but it's not as big a deal as when you're talking about a 5-member Board of Supervisors. 2/3 of 6 is 4. What's 2/3 of 5? 2/3 of 5 is 5. You are talking, because it's more than 4. Okay? So you are talking about a unanimous vote. And that's all I'm going to say about that one. The other issues that you're going to see on your ballot are local bond issues. There are various school districts and cities that have local bond issues. on your ballot. I can't possibly speak to all of them for all of the cities that everyone in this audience represents, but they're all going to be very similar to the large bond issue that I just pointed out to you. The one thing of note that I would point out is that there are some school districts that do not use matching funds, do not apply to the state for matching funds from that pot that I just talked about, and some that do. And the ones that don't are going to be asking you for a lot more money than the ones that do. And that's all. So, for example, in Fullerton Joint High School District and Fullerton Elementary School District have a habit of not applying for matching funds from the state. So their bond issues typically are a much bigger ask than Brea and Yorba Linda, for example. And those are the cities that are the closest around us that I happen to know off the top of my head. That's it. Thank you so much for allowing us to be with you this morning.